All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Rise Urban Nation podcast. I'm excited today because we got a special guest. Thank you to my girl Shola for introducing Ighosime to the podcast. It's good to have you here. We're here today, and we're going to dive into the world of finance, investment, a little football, not American football, but the real football, as Americans
the
like
one you
to
actually play
call
with
it.
your feet.
Yes, soccer.
Yeah.
But and just to tell you, this conversation we're gonna have is about the world of finance, investment, banking, with a special focus on emerging markets. My brother is joining us today. He's a seasoned expert in the field, currently serving as AVP at Moody's for EMEA financial institutions. Did I say that right?
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I got it
We'll
right
get
because
into that. I'll tell you.
your resume is long, but me and him was having a whole
I'm just old.
wonderful
That's all.
conversation.
I've just been here long enough.
I know. Me and him was we was just vibing before we even got on the podcast. We probably should have hit record a long time ago because we was having some really great conversations.
We should have.
But you know what? I wanted to start off. How did you meet Shola? Because I know I told you a little bit how we met, but how did you guys meet?
We met through our parents. I've known Shola since I think I was like 7 or something.
Oh wow, y'all go back like beans and pacifiers.
Back. So way before she left Nigeria, we met through our folks. You know how it is.
Right.
Folks kind of hang out, then they've got kids, and the kids kind of like, oh, who are you? Let's go play. And so
Right.
that's how long I've known her. And then of course, leaving Nigeria for a bit, we lost touch, and then I think through the magic of Facebook, which to date to myself in terms of age, I think I was one of probably the first like million people in the world to get on Facebook. And the reason being was Facebook first started, I think it was in 2004, started at Harvard. And initially you could only get access to Facebook when you went to a US university. And the way it kind of started, it like began in like sort of like the Boston area and worked its way down like the Eastern Seaboard. And so with George Washington, which is where I went, being in the Mid-Atlantic, it was just kind of like, so it's not even like anything cool, like I'm bragging. It's just literally, that's how it happened. Maybe the first 2 million people, right? But if you're thinking about, a US population of what, 340 million, 330 million at the time, it was quite significant in that respect. So yeah, anyway, that's how Shola and I, met, lost touch, got back in touch, etc. Then she moved back to Nigeria for a while, and so on and so forth. But we've reconnected after a while, and we're just talking about different things. And she is like, I don't know, she's just like
she's a powerhouse. That mind of hers is always going.
She's spinning. She's a dynamo. I'm just like, I literally said to her the other day, like we're talking, I'm like, Shola, I can't keep up with you. I can't. Like you're just like it's like Tasmanian Devil and Roadrunner at the same time. So she's spinning but zipping from place to place. But I have a lot of respect for that, and I have a lot of time. And the truth is, when you read stuff about people in sort of like the venture capital space, the startup space, people who are creating and launching ventures and like companies. And they talk about how, every day is different. I'm always doing this. I'm always doing that. And I'm just like, man, you lying.
Right.
It can't be. You're all just glamorizing this. But when you meet someone who does it day in, day out, you're like, okay.
Right.
And I think it just becomes a case of, is it for you or is it not for you? Can you understand it? That kind of thing. But no, it's great.
Right. Like that, I attest to that because working with her and starting, even when I started up this podcast and this venture, and it morphed from just a podcast to like, all right, how do we do social innovation and DEI all in the one breath to all these different things that are going on in our region, and then how do we look at it from a global standpoint? Like her mind just goes. So my mind was more locally, like connecting all the dots, and then she came into the picture, and then she took me to this global mindset, and I was like, oh snap, this is bigger than I thought.
And I do
So,
like that. I appreciate that about her.
yeah, so I appreciate that too. So I want us because we was talking about. I realized before we came on, ladies and gentlemen, we had a whole conversation about growing up Nigerian and names and so forth. What's the meaning of your name? Because we all know Nigerian names.
Oh man.
They're not just a name. They
Oh,
have a meaning, a calling, and all this good stuff with it. So
you
so
get it.
so
You get it.
give us the full name and the meaning of it.
You get it. You're getting deep right out the gate. I like that. I
Yeah.
mean, my my first name Ighosime means I look upwards to God or to the Lord, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, it's just like you said, Nigerian names always mean something, and most of the time it has to do with God.
Yeah.
And it's just in each of the languages, one way or another, right? So yeah, that's what my name
So
means.
you know what, Ego? This explains why the light is shining from your head and you're
Oh
looking
my
like Jesus now,
gosh!
like the Black Jesus.
So like, y'all better tell everybody that I'm out here being bald Jesus, man. Because last we checked, Jesus supposed to have hell, but this one don't. Man, y'all forgive me, man. God forgive me. This is semi blaspheming out here, but we're vibing, man. It's all good. Yeah. So that's what my name means, and it's a
uh,
powerful name, and it's something that I try to take strength from on the daily. Something I was talking to my dad about the other day, and he reminded me, kind of like just a bit more about it. So yeah,
yeah, like I love that. I love that. And when you were first telling your story too, I was when you said George Washington, right? Is
that's
that
right.
the school you went to?
Not
You wasn't
Georgetown,
too far.
George Washington.
Yeah,
You
you
know.
wasn't too far from me because I grew up in Northwest DC, so like
Okay,
I know where you was at. So
there you
like
go.
I wish we could have ran into each other at some point during that time that you was there.
Yeah, yeah, it would
so
have been
so
nice.
so now I think I remember reading too that you had in your journey you spent some time in Cleveland. If I remember if I read correctly, like tell me about your journey from Cleveland to London and your current role at Moody's.
Oh no 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 not Cleveland. I'm trying to think about what you'd have seen. So when I was in the state, so in my time in the states, it was just all DC.
Okay.
Maybe uh,
I can't remember where I
I
read
think
it
I
at.
think no no hell, it could have been. It's not nothing work related. I think
Gotcha.
yeah. So not Cleveland. It could be okay. So anyway, I guess leaving that out. Let's journey wise. I mean so leaving DC, I moved back to Nigeria,
Hmm.
uh, where I substantively began my career. I
Hmm.
did have a very short stint in DC where I first of all worked for a startup, not
Uh-huh.
startup, excuse me, a nonprofit called Kid Power DC. Shout out to a guy called Max Skolnick, who I've not seen in like nearly 2 decades. But it was just I think as a Nigerian student, there's a reality
Hmm.
around the ability to sort of work legally in the states.
Hmm.
So as an international student, and if you don't get basically what is called a H-1B visa, it's very difficult for you to kind of
Mm.
stay and work properly. But what I did get coming out of university is something called optional practical training, and that
Yeah.
lets you for a year just kind of work pretty much anywhere. But then you have to figure out if there's a place where you can work where the company would want to sponsor you for a visa. So anyway,
Gotcha.
I spent very interesting sort of 4 or 5 months at Kid Power, and it was really around working with kids in I hate the term inner city, right? But
Hmm.
kids from the tougher parts of DC, the Northeast, the
Yeah.
Southeast, right? Helping
Yeah.
them, sort of with like after school programs, giving them stuff to do that, minimizes or at least tries to mitigate their ability to kind of hit the street and, see all sorts. So
Hmm.
that was very interesting. It was very rewarding work. And then the next thing I did, I was a research analyst for about 6 months at a place called Institutional Shareholder Services.
Hmm.
Um, and what that company did was essentially um, condense, basically, yeah, you have public companies who have proposals about what they want to do over the next year, special resolutions and strategic options, and the shareholders
Mm-hmm.
have to vote. So what we
Mm-hmm.
essentially did was we would just get what they were called the proxy circulars, which also included, voting forms and stuff like that, and basically summarize. I would get a 300-page proxy circular and have to summarize the key points and put it in a
Mm-hmm.
shorter document that the investors would be like, oh, okay, I get it. Okay, I want to do this, I
Mm-hmm.
want to do that, da, da, da. And they would basically outsource their voting to the company, and we would do that on their behalf. It was very interesting, but obviously I was
Mm-hmm.
always meant to go back to Nigeria. And I started off in investment banking, literally at
Mm-hmm.
the, again, I'll kind of tell y'all how old I am, but basically I began, I, my, I began in January 2007. Um,
He's like, I began when I had hair.
yeah, like for real. I was still clutching on to the last vestiges of my hairline. And after a while, I was just like, man, give up, bro. Just let it go, like Frozen, you know. Um, and that was very interesting, just coming back to Nigeria and trying to figure things out. And
Like,
some people would ask, like, oh, why didn't you just do investment banking in the States? And the truth is, I didn't initially think I would like investment banking or I'd be interested. Right? There was a
like,
book I read called Monkey Business about
like,
investment bankers in New York, especially, and I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. But belatedly, I would be like, actually, you know what? Maybe that I should have gone for that. But I think that life would have been completely different. And I think
like,
what investment banking in an environment like Nigeria offers you that doesn't offer you in New York or London or whatever big city in the West is that you don't necessarily become a specialized. You don't become specialized straight out the gate, right? You're going to be
mm-hmm.
like, oh, I do equity capital markets, and I focus on
Mm-hmm.
technology, media, and telecommunications, right? So
Mm-hmm.
TMT. It's like, no, I
Mm-hmm.
work for this company, and one client wants to raise equity, another client wants to raise debt, somebody's trying to do a merger or some sort of like strategic takeover, and
Yeah.
the company I work for is that we're working for all of them at the same time.
Oh
And
man,
you
that's
then
pretty
also
interesting.
have, yeah, you also have the evolution of sort of regulations in the market where um, a lot of innovation actually comes from you as the investment bankers
Mm-hmm.
because you're looking at what's happening in the states. You're looking at things like Sarbanes-Oxley and how that regulation changed the environments. You're looking at the evolution of board structures. In the states you can have a chairman be a
Mm-hmm.
CEO, but in Nigeria that's not possible. So you're looking at
Yeah.
all these different things. You're trying to say, okay, what can we sort of take from the West and bring to Africa, emerging markets, and then kind of tailor it so that it's fit for purpose, but at the same
Mm-hmm.
time we're trying to get towards best practice market innovation, that kind of stuff. Very
Yeah.
interesting point out. So yeah, that's kind of how I
Yeah.
began my career.
Oh man, that was I love that you took us down that whole journey because something I always tell the youth, especially when it's funny too. Me and you have some parallels in life working in DC.
Yeah.
Uh, when I had a mentor that got me, eventually over here to the West Coast, and then
Hmm.
in my career, I eventually started working with inner city youth here in San Diego, where I created
No
programs.
way.
So that was a whole
Wow.
another thing. And so I was like, man, me and him got parallels. Uh,
Yeah.
and that's what kind of led me to, eventually do this podcast because, I want to go back to what you were talking about that during that period of time
Hmm.
of working with inner city, learning, and then just what you learned about yourself and too. And we kind of spoke about this before we even got online. Is
Yeah.
like how you know, and this is me saying, like, I feel like, some of the black youth are just, they, one, they can't be what they can't see, right?
Yeah.
And they don't know who they are. They
That's it.
don't know, like, they've been so far
That's it.
removed from
That's it.
their history, their ancestry, their heritage, and so forth that
Mm.
they can't connect to that. Like me and you can connect to it because we had it
Yeah.
centered in our household. So
Yeah.
what came across sometimes as arrogance or like proudness was no having a strong like, nah, that's
Mm.
not who I
Hmm.
am, right?
Hmm.
I don't know. What's your take on that?
I agree wholeheartedly, right? And it's funny because when you're growing up as a kid, first of all, it's interesting. I began my education in sort of like the Nigerian slash British system or curriculum. But I think at some point, my dad, who, always, my dad started his career in oil and gas. He always came out to the States. So he was always in Texas. He was always in, other parts of the world. But, a lot of his team were out there, Dallas and Houston, etc. And he just always kind of looked at the benefits of the American system, the way kids are taught, the way um, uh, they're encouraged to think through problems and stuff like that. And he was like, okay,
Hmm.
you're gonna go to the American school. So I started going
Hmm.
to American school in Nigeria when I was
Hmm.
about 10, going on 11. And I was actually the first in my family to do so. It's not nothing special, just kind of like with the times, right?
Hmm.
When you get to a particular point that it's like, oh, okay, this is the thing.
Hmm.
Um, and it was interesting because when you are now getting used to that system, you then turn around and look at your kind of system, the way you've kind of grown up, and say, oh, okay. You now start comparing the two.
Hmm.
Eventually, you now start thinking, I see some deficits in this Nigerian way of thinking and culture, etc. One of the
Hmm.
most glaring examples is in our culture, Nigerian culture, you're not encouraged to question your adults, so your elders,
Mm-mm.
excuse me, right?
Mm-mm.
You're a kid, even like at my age now, if I were to find someone 20 years older than me and you question them, they'd be like, who are you talking to? And it's just like,
Yeah.
well, and it's funny because there was always that tension of like, but wait a second, you sent me to an American school to get a better education, to expand my mind, to expand this, to expand that, trial and error, all that kind of stuff. And then I come home and I try and, uh, implement that and I get yelled at.
Hmm. Yeah.
But with
Or
maturity,
get smacked down.
hey, one or two, just like you're just like damn, But yeah, that was it. But it's interesting now though, with time and hindsight, and maturity, right? You do
Hmm.
realize that there was a place for you to still hold on to your Nigerian or your African heritage values, etc., and that tension did not then mean that one had to exist in place of the other. And it is
Hmm.
sad when you see people who do or who have had that sort of background and have moved away from it, um,
Hmm.
for many reasons. Some people like they don't want that Nigerian part of their life because maybe it represented a very tough time for them, um,
Hmm.
and kind of moving away from it is a defense mechanism. So, and that's
Yeah.
fair. I just think it's a shame when that happens because, like I said, the two can coexist.
Yeah,
So
they
even
can.
though a lot of what I think about and the way I approach things is very quote unquote westernized, there is
Hmm.
this underpinning, there is this foundation of, strong Nigerian, African, values, viewpoints, culture, etc. And of course, the things that I think are wrong with the way we approach things, I'll call them out. I'll always be the first to do that.
Hmm.
Sometimes when I'm talking to my mom thinks I'm like, on the one hand, such a fantastic, son. On the other hand, I infuriate the heck out of her. She's like, what did I, what? She just be there, be like, what did I do to deserve this boy? Oh Lord. I'll be talking to her about it, but mom, da, da, da. She's like, is that how you talk to your mother? I'm like,
Yeah.
mom, it's not a matter of this is how I talk to my mother. It's a thing of you ask me a question, I'm giving you the reality of something. And it's just back and forth, back and forth. And so I'm just
Yeah.
at the point now where it's like, it's not that like, oh, I'm not gonna change or whatever the case may be. It's just that, but mom, come on. You have to
Yeah.
look at these things in a particular way. So
Look,
we
I
really have that.
resonate
It's
with that
fun.
wholeheartedly. It's like, what? Why have you forsaken me?
Yeah, yeah. Ah,
And
what?
then the other day, my son, the 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 director, the
Yeah,
chief.
yeah, yeah. and then they'll be hailing you for your accomplishments. And then when you now get
Yeah.
home, like, who are you talking to? Oh, so you think because you think because you have title in your office, you want to come and talk to me? Well, let me tell you, title. I am your mother. I am your father. There's no title bigger than that one. Do you understand me? And you two, you be there being like, okay, I've heard you. So after a while, you just learn how to just kind of keep quiet out of respect,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Right.
because not everything is a fight. And honestly, in some respects, it's not their fault, right? Because for them, the learning curve is so steep, right?
It
Like, how are they
is.
to unpack decades and decades of their sort of background and the way they were brought up and so on, and then you come
Right.
here with your highfalutin, fancy
Mm.
schmancy education and all that, and want to tell them something. Who are you?
You know the
I will
way. You know the
slap
way I
you
look at
back
it.
to you know.
I look at it like this. It's a delicate balance because if I'm going to now educate them and unravel everything that they
Mm,
know, I have to be able to give them a good foundation and something to
yeah,
land on to be able
yeah,
to 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 be able to sit with that and then
yeah,
start to build
yeah.
from where they're at to move up. And so sometimes that is so steep that I was like, all right, I can't unpack all of them. They would just that one they're gonna immediately reject it because I
Mm,
now I'm
mm.
breaking up their poking holes into everything
Exactly,
and it's gonna infuriate them. And
exactly.
then next thing you know,
Yeah,
they're just gonna reject everything coming out my
yeah,
mouth. But
exactly. You're
I
right.
drop little nuggets now here and there and they'll come back like a month, 2, 3 months later, and hit me like, "Did you know blah blah blah?" Because they went and did some more research. I was like, "What?"
I had no idea. I tell you,
Okay.
man, and not to get quote unquote controversial, but one of the ones that has been a very interesting one for them is when you talk to them about these guys, Meghan and Harry, and that
Yeah.
whole thing. Oh my goodness. We can do an episode on that alone because there are so many things to unpack from
Uh-huh.
a sort of colonial history perspective, from a contemporary modern day perspective, from a family perspective, But where I apply what you're talking about and just dropping nuggets is like you don't give them the whole dish and want to say, come and eat this eba and okra and put some crab and
Right.
meat and everything. It's like,
Yeah.
here's this morsel, here's this profiterole, and they chew
Yeah.
that one, they come back later, and you leave little crumbs so that they start to understand. Ah, okay. And
Uh-huh.
I could get into like kind of what I talked to them about it, but like I know that's not the purpose of this episode. So
But
the
I
vibes is
get
the
what you're
vibes is
saying.
too much, man.
Man, the vibes is too much. Like I knew this was gonna be a good episode as soon as
Oh
we
damn,
started,
man.
and before we hit record, we was already
Y'all,
into like a
y'all,
whole bunch of
y'all,
conversations.
y'all done messed up, man. Have me on here.
Oh man!
Yeah,
Wait,
man.
so let me go back real quick because one of the things I wanted to figure out is what motivated you to focus specifically on financial institutions in Africa, and then what are some unique challenges that you see in this market? Because Africa, the market is, especially ever since talking to Shola, it really it fascinates me. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
I've never seen a market behave, react, work sort of like an African market. Like,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
the funny thing is, I this was a coincidence. I happened yesterday. I was meeting with my financial advisor, and I was putting some money into uh, uh, what is it? I can't remember what account it was. A capital gains account, something of that nature. We
Okay.
set something else up, so that I can just diversify my portfolio a little bit, uh,
Hell yeah.
and and I was like, man, I can't wait to have this conversation with you tomorrow because the African market, I don't know. I don't know how anyone makes investments in that and be able to navigate that
Oh
market.
yeah. No, there's a lot to unpack there, but okay. I mean, going back to your original question about banking in Africa and how do I focus on financial institutions. I mean, so I guess for the audience, right? The first thing is to establish that I began in investment banking, financial advisory, working with what we call small SMEs, small medium
Mhm,
enterprises, which in the States I think we just call small businesses. As an independent advisor, and then obviously working with larger corporates as an investment bank proper, investment banker. Um,
mhm,
but currently, what I'm doing is something called credit ratings,
mhm,
and we focus on African banks. Now,
Mm,
that's the specific role in this instance. But to answer your second question, the
mhm,
reason why there is so much of a focus on African banks is because they're the sort of gateway into any economy. And in the first instance, you might think, oh, it's actually more of like maybe like a manufacturing company or, a shoe producer or something like that. But it's actually really the banks because, first of all,
mhm,
the banks understand the market. The
mhm,
people who you want to invest in are the bank's clients, whether
mhm,
it's because of deposits that they put with the bank or if it's because of loans that the banks extend to them, etc. But I
mhm,
guess even beyond that, eh, the bank is there fundamentally to serve the economy. Now, the business model doesn't always make it seem that way because when you think about the fact that these guys, um, you know, they've got cash, it's on their balance
mhm,
sheet. They not, and usually the cash comes from deposits. You then have to take the deposits and say, what am I doing with them? You're either lending them or you're investing them.
mhm,
And so there's always that mix. So you have some economies, um, maybe like kind of like to name names, right?
mhm,
There's a ratio in the bank called the loan to deposit ratio. So if let's say the deposit is let's say 70% of how the bank is funded, right? You then take those deposits and say how much percentage wise are you going to loan out? In some markets like Angola, you might see that loan to deposit ratios are closer to 20 to 30%. And what that essentially means is that for every dollar they get in as a deposit, they're only extending 20, 30 cents as a loan. In Nigeria, you have it closer to 60%. And so,
mhm,
you then and what really drives that, apart from regulation, because that factors into it. But what really drives that, honestly, is the scope and of the opportunities, the size of the opportunities, and also just the diversity in the economy. So in a
mhm,
Nigeria, you've got 200 plus million people. You've got so many different businesses, regional, national, only
mhm,
focused on specific cities, etc. You've got manufacturing, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, housing, just everything. And so you have
mhm.
plenty of opportunities to be able
Right.
to, extend, so many loans. Whereas
Mhm,
in an Angola, where maybe it's not as big, it's not as diverse, it's more monoline in terms of maybe oil and gas earnings and so on. You then
yeah.
have it's a bit more difficult. Now, it's not that they can't increase that. It's just that
Mhm,
you then have to look at it from a risk perspective and say, okay, how much do I want to extend to the kinds of customers that we have available. Now, in
mm,
general, you want to give loans to companies that have a history, they've got financials you can check out, they've got an office, you can go look for them, versus maybe giving it to individuals, which is a bit more difficult. With and
mm,
this now gets into the legality of like, you know actual structures of okay, I have collateral or I have assets that can be sort of collected and
mhm,
posted against my loan. Individuals have that too, but you have a certain level of individual. So what that then now starts to show is that there is an opportunity for different grades of banking. And we already
mm,
have that in the States, we have that in the UK, other parts of Europe, because these economies are so much more mature. So the
yeah.
unsecured lending market, for instance, in the UK is huge, and you can
Yeah.
get loans, personal loans, to up to £25,000,
Oh wow.
which to individuals in an African continent context is a lot more difficult because first of all, in the whatever currency it is, um, that's a lot of money. And so you're saying
Mhm,
to yourself that, wow, do I have enough faith in my, uh, customers that they will pay back, etc. So there's an element of risk. But what also
mhm,
underpins that is over here in the West, you've got credit history, you've got credit scoring, you've got social
mhm,
security, you've got ID. People know where you are, where you live, where you work, what you do.
mhm,
And so if you want to go mess around and not pay your loans or your debts, then it's going to reflect. And then the next time you try and get something or whatever the case may be, you don't get it. You get in trouble. Whereas in
mhm.
Africa, that a lot of that is not yet developed. Now I know I've kind of
Yeah.
straight away, but in just kind of assessing how important the banks are and why it's very important to focus on them as institutions because they're essentially like a conduit to the economy.
Mhm.
It's something that has to be focused on.
Yeah, I'm glad we're having this conversation because I've been brainstorming this over here in the States,
Mm,
with other fellow Nigerians here,
mm,
or just with Black Americans who want to, like, ever since George Floyd happened, look at, like, how
mm,
do we come together as, Black people,
mhm,
and Africans all across the diaspora
mhm,
to really put our money together, invest in each other,
mhm.
and I feel like this could be, now that you're talking, that maybe the black bank, African banks, and then if there was a location here in the U.S. that if we put all our money in there, we
Mhm.
can kind of really change the game with this and look at how do
Well,
we invest each other in some
well,
type of
well, I mean, I'm with you on that, and to an extent, you do have some African banks. So there's one called UBA, United Bank for
UBA.
Africa, which is originally a Nigerian bank that is in like 20 something African countries. It's one of the
Hmm.
largest, definitely one of the largest in
Do they have
Nigeria.
a U.S. branch?
That's the thing. They actually do have a New York branch, and but what I will caveat by saying is that most of these banks with UK or US branches are more set up for corporates. So, for instance,
Mm,
if you've got a large Nigerian client that you're doing a lot of business with and all that kind of stuff, and then they have business interests in the States or the UK, then you can bank them seamlessly in those
mm,
countries. Um, there is some, I guess, business on the quote unquote retail or individual side.
hmm,
But, to kind of approximate kind of what we're talking about in terms of individuals and I'll take my
hmm,
deposits to this bank or that bank, it's still got a ways to go. But the first, the first forays have started happening, with there's
yeah.
way more Nigerian banks with a UK presence than with the US. Only a handful have them. Um,
Hmm.
and over time we'll see more of that happen with other African banks for sure.
Yeah. Another thing that you mentioned was you talked about currency a little bit,
Hmm.
and not to go into a deep dive about currency, but one thing that sits on my mind is, would the continent
Oh
benefit
yeah.
from having one currency? Do you ever see,
Ooh.
yet one? And what in your mind? I know it's a wild dream, but humor me for a little
Uh,
bit. What would it take, if you think it would benefit? What would it take for the continent to get
oh
on one currency?
man, you asked some tough questions, my man. I will. I ain't even going front, bro. I mean, look, I will say that it's a good idea. It's a nice idea. How practical it is hard to say because, first of all, let's get sort of geopolitical. How do you
Okay.
break down Africa? If you take the entirety, top to toe, of Africa, you're talking 1.4 billion people or 1.36 or whatever the case may be, right? If you then now say you're looking at that, you're looking at Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, Western Sahara, all the way
Hmm.
down to South Africa, Namibia, Angola, etc., Zimbabwe. That is, first of all, already so many different types of people, cultures,
Hmm.
economies, trade patterns, trade flows, etc. Then you now get to the cultural aspects.
Hmm.
The first time I noticed this thing was when I did an internship at the World Bank when I was in between my junior and my senior year in university.
Hmm.
And I then noticed there was something called MENA. I was like, what is that? These acronyms. I said, oh, Middle East and North Africa. And that's when I first learned of Sub-Saharan Africa as like a
Hmm.
region. And I was like, what's the point of that? Africa is a continent. You don't see people, and of course there was there. You go kind of Western Europe or
Hmm.
Eurasia. So people are always trying to subdivide land
Hmm.
masses, maybe based on either culture or either economic, realities, whatever the
Hmm.
case may be. And the reason I mention that though is because you see, when you then start talking about Africa, the implication is that there's far more in common with between sub-Saharan Africa, which is then about about 1.1 or 1.2 billion people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying that there's more in common with the Egypts, the Algerians, etc., than there is as with the Middle East, the Saudis, the the UAE, etc., Qatar, than there is the rest of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
That alone would make having a single currency exceedingly difficult.
Mm.
The other thing to look at is, what is it exactly that, these countries all produce? And part of what will also make that difficult is if you look at Europe, for instance, a lot of European
Mm-hmm.
countries produce something. A lot of them are not, uh, you know, the bulk of their earnings doesn't come from just kind of like one thing or two things, or the bulk of their foreign exchange earnings, I think is probably the more important thing to think about. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so, you then say to yourself, okay, with all that kind of diversity and trying to figure out what is what, then how do you streamline everything
Mm.
in such a way that you can now say, great, we've got like a common currency and then we're trading and everything's equal. I don't know if you're aware, we've got this thing called the Africa Free Continental Free Trade Agreement. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
what that is essentially meant to be is what can help lead to what the EU is now.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that has been in the works for a long time, that
Mm-hmm.
they've now, most African countries have now signed on to it. I think there's a
Mm-hmm.
difference between, I think, signing on to it and then ratifying. I'm not quite 100% sure how that works. But
Yeah.
in terms of implementation, that hasn't even happened yet. Like really and
Mm-hmm.
truly. There's a secretariat that I think is based in, is it Ghana?
Mm-hmm.
And there are all these plans for how goods and services are going to move across, but it's going to take time to implement. That would probably be the first step to a continental currency. But because of
Yeah.
those cultural elements, because of those sort of um, trade and logistical elements, it would be very difficult to implement that.
Yeah.
I think if
From
Africa alone can just implement a free trade area,
mm-hmm.
that'll kill so many issues. We probably wouldn't even need a common currency, to be honest.
Yeah. And then when I hear you talk about it, and then also thinking about, the Africans across the diaspora that are here, I
Hmm.
think, what comes to mind for me is, some type of brand building, visibility
Hmm.
activities for sub
Hmm.
Saharan Africa, and really the branding and education around these pieces to really uh, warm folks up to the idea, get people more educated, get people more
Yeah,
on board.
yeah.
Um, then I feel there needs to be more of those efforts and initiatives. I mean, there probably already some.
Oh no, there are
You
definitely
probably
some.
maybe know about some
No,
of
no,
these
there are definitely
elaborate
some. But
initiatives.
no, but you're right, because I think what some people, one of the first ways to latch on to that is by looking at, let's say, diaspora remittances, right? So
Hmm.
your parents are there in the States, presumably, but you know ostensibly, you know your folks' cousins, brothers, sisters, aunties, uncles, they're in Nigeria. um
Hmm.
and so it's then a case of I have to send money home. Before, they were
Hmm.
using Western Union, they were using I forget, MoneyGram, etc. All these different ways of transferring money. But now you have more efficient ways, usually electronic, fintechs, digital banking, etc., of sending money home,
Which is
and
still
that's
not
then
clean though. There's
it.
still
it
some. I have to pay my virtual assistant that works in Nigeria,
mhm.
and the amount of hoops that to go to make sure all the money
Yep,
gets
yep,
where it needs to get without
yeah,
losing
yeah,
half of it.
yeah. No, and that's why, but that's why some of these fintechs are kind of coming up. They're trying to fill in these gaps because up till now it hasn't been as efficient as it should be, right? So currency exchange rate aside, right? Just that process of being able to get the physical dollars or whatever it is, you send over, then you find somebody who wants to change and put it in somebody else's account. Um, it's tough. And that's where kind of, regulations and stuff like that are trying to, I guess, be more streamlined to be able to make that more, more, make it easier. but it'll still
Mhm.
also continue to take some time. Although to be fair, yeah, it kind of depends, right? I think in a place like Nigeria, uh,
Mhm.
and if you look at the transition from the previous government to kind of where we are now,
Mhm.
in some respects, you have to say that like it has been made more difficult in the past than it is
Mhm.
now. When you think about how the rise of sort of fintechs that do crypto has
Mhm.
taken place, but the previous administration wasn't very forthcoming or welcoming of some of these
Mhm.
things. So,
Yeah.
from some respects, innovation kind of gets stifled a little bit, and you don't see
Mhm.
some of these things. But then they're also still kind of happening. So, do you just kind of open up and say, you know what, here's a sandbox, let's all play, innovate, come up with products,
Mhm.
or do you still try and stifle it? But then these guys are going to find other ways to innovate anyway. But I think there's still some ways to go, and I think right now what's going on in Nigeria from a currency perspective is, and this kind of alludes to what I was saying with the other countries having a common currency. You see,
Mhm.
Nigeria, we get probably our the economy is actually fairly well diversified. I think in any given
Mhm.
year, oil and gas is about 10% of GDP. Um, Agriculture is somewhere between 20, 22, 23%. They have what they call services, etc. Right? But in terms of what brings in foreign exchange,
Mhm.
it's all oil and gas. 90%
Mhm.
roughly of what we earn in USD is from oil and gas. Now you need to kind of change that, right? How do you do that? You export more. So
Mhm.
you know you'll go to your local Whole Foods, you'll pick up, I don't know, an orange, pineapple,
Mhm.
whatever. The tag will say originally from Ghana, originally from Sierra Leone, originally from wherever. And you rarely see it saying originally from Nigeria. and
Yeah.
and and part of the reason why is that, first of all, that we just don't export enough, and that's partly because we don't produce enough. And so
Yeah.
if you produce for the Nigerian economy, there's just not enough to go around. You need more, which is why there's so
Mhm.
many imports. And so when you're spending your foreign exchange earnings on importing and servicing your debt, then you're never
Mhm.
really going to get to a level of currency stability that allows
Yeah.
you to even start to have the conversation about a unified currency, because every
Yeah.
economy is run
And, and
differently.
and I agree, and I think that's where not to take us down a whole nother rabbit hole of like how the infrastructure needs to be there so that
Hmm.
they can have the level of export and
Yep,
production. I mean, that's why we see China coming into places like Nigeria and places like
yep,
Africa now to build the
yep,
infrastructure.
yep,
But
yep,
what's the debt that they're going to pay on that
yep,
to be able to service that
yep.
so that they can break even? I don't know what that looks like, but that's a whole nother
Yeah,
rabbit hole right there.
it is. It is another rabbit hole. That's another podcast episode. I mean, my man, you've got like 5 episodes lined up. All of a sudden, y'all gonna have me back here every month. You know, and now here we are again, folks. Our
but
usual monthly session.
yeah,
Ighosime talking
so
Africa and trade and business. You
but
know.
let's shift gears a little bit because you recently wrote about business lessons from Arsenal.
Yes,
Can you
sir.
explain how sports and business cycles are similar?
I would be happy to. And yes, for all y'all out there, be like, man, he's an Arsenal fan. I'm like, yes, sir. Have been, ain't changing. It is what it is. I've been through the tough times, and now we're getting back to the good times. Look, the cycles are interesting, right? Because it all comes down to, I want to say, it all comes down to resources.
Uh-huh.
And why I say that is when you think about the periods of dominance. So, what I write in my piece is I talk about the Premier League era, which is what we're in
Mm-hmm.
now. It used to be called the English First Division, and there was a strong legacy of teams from that time. Liverpool was the team, but you have to
Mm-hmm.
keep in mind that these clubs are, the youngest of them is about 90 years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
Arsenal is about 126, 127 years old. Manchester United, City, all these guys are well over 100 years. So when you're coming into a Premier League era with 100 years at your back, and you've got 18 Premier League titles being or first division titles. This is Liverpool. Um, you're the big dog, and
Mm-hmm.
Arsenal had 10, and then the next closest was Manchester United with 7. But when you
Mm-hmm.
come into the Premier League, a couple of things changed. First of all, you've got these massive sponsorships. The Premier
Mm-hmm.
League used to be called the Barclays Premier League. And,
Mm-hmm.
for those who are not familiar, Barclays is a massive international bank. Then you've got TV money. And there
Mm-hmm.
was, the games are so exciting and fast paced that there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot to put on TV and people are interested. Now it's not as it hasn't been as big a thing in the States as it has, let's say, in the
Mm-hmm.
last 5 years. Historically, it wasn't like that. Nobody really cared. This is even
Yeah.
before MLS began, or
Mm-hmm.
right, a few years before MLS began, right? And then you look at in the UK, and you're now like, oh wow, like football culture in the UK is a thing. It's huge. And so you're now bottling that excitement, the drama, the crowds, what it means to fans, what it means to towns. You're putting that in a bottle and you're selling it. And so as the TV money starts to come in, the money is shared between the clubs. It then now starts to come down to how are you investing the money and which kind of manager is the one who's kind of leading you. And so in the beginning of the Premier League era, you're now looking at a situation where Manchester United has gotten a new coach. His name is Sir Alex Ferguson. He's relatively young. He'd won in a few other places, but he didn't have the best starts to life in the Premier League. But by the
Mm-hmm.
time you get to the year 2000, keep in mind the Premier League started in 92, 93. You get to the year 2000, Manchester United have added a few more titles. Arsenal has added like one or two.
Mm-hmm.
Chelsea wasn't even on the map at this point in time. They had, I think, a few titles from yonks ago, but I mean, these guys were distant fourth. Manchester City was still in a completely different division. But what started to happen was you then see the
Mm-hmm.
dominance between Manchester United and Arsenal going back and forth. You get a sprinkling of Blackburn, a couple of the clubs. Clubs get relegated, and this doesn't happen in American sports. If you don't have enough points or whoever has the three
Mm-hmm.
lowest points at the end of the year, you go down to the lower division. People come up, and there's this cycle. But as you
Mm-hmm.
come up, those of you who are able to continue staying at the top, and you're getting your revenues from match day, so you got the big
Mm-hmm.
stadiums, people are coming. You got your revenues from advertising, people are buying your
Mm-hmm.
jerseys. The marketing budgets are huge. You've got the TV money. And so you keep getting these monies in, you keep on investing them, you get the right coaches, you keep winning, you make money for winning. And so over time, resources start to stack up. And that is what helps your dominance. So let's
Mm-hmm.
park that for 1 second. Look at the evolution of certain companies. Biggest companies in the world right now. First thing you'll say, oh, Amazon, oh, Apple, oh, this, right? But if you look at the evolution of Apple and kind of how it first started, Jobs and Wozniak and, oh, their garage and this and that, and trying to really build up in this level of sales they had. And then they kind of hit not necessarily a brick wall, but then when the other companies started innovating around them, and then you look at the time when Jobs left and then he now comes back,
Mm-hmm.
he now takes things to the next level. And then there's another clear period where Apple is way up here and everybody's kind of like trying to reach. And then different changes happen at the HPs, at the Dells, because Dell wasn't really on the map back in the time when Apple first came out. I mean, Michael Dell himself was still,
Yeah.
kind of like a newer guy, younger, etc. And then over time, that builds up. Look at sports. You got Nike and Adidas. Well, before Nike, you had Adidas, and before Adidas, you had other people. But you then have the clear period of
Yeah,
Nike
you
and
had
Adidas.
Converse in there too. Converse was the bigger
Exactly.
name out of the
There you
two
go.
before that, and then
Yeah. And then now
like if
who
you look
owns
at the Michael
Converse, right?
Jordan story, Nike wasn't a nobody when Michael Jordan signed to them.
Exactly. They were nobody. And in fact, I just watched the film the other day, right? And so this is the thing. So you now have that, and then over time, but who are the top guys now? You got Nike, you still got Adidas. Okay, Converse is now owned by Nike, but who the hell is Under Armour? Where'd they come from? But you go and look at the story. I
Mhm.
think it was the late '90s that Kevin Plank started and all that kind of stuff. It was niche. It was first of all, I think specialists like American football gear and stuff like that. And over time, they've grown. And then you now got, I mean, New
Mm-hmm.
Balance has been around for a while, but again, New Balance, they were there. I used to wear the 574s in university. I
Mm-hmm.
had like three pairs, and then they kind of go down, and then they're nowhere to be seen. All
But
of a
look,
sudden,
that
they're
that
having
was the
the
thing to wear in
biggest
DC. Like
resurgence.
we all wore New Balance in
I
DC.
had New Balances, man. I had gray 574s. I had white 574s. I think I had blue ones as well. And
Them shoes was comfortable too.
hey, comfortable with the white tee. You got that fit, baby. Everything looking right. But
Mm-hmm.
you've seen this, right? And so Nike kind of has stayed at the top. Adidas has stayed at the top. They're having their fight. Then the Under Armour comes in. The New Balance is back. They're having their fight. You've got other guys underneath, who are coming and trying to challenge. And over time, the resources. So you see it in the technology industry, you see it in footwear and apparel, you see it in the NBA, right? Like you see it when we're looking at sports. So because these sports are run, these teams, excuse me, are run at businesses at the same time as entertainment for sports fans, etc. You start to see parallels. Periods of dominance
Mm-hmm.
where either it's helped by technology, it's helped by capital. Because going back to the Premier League,
Mm-hmm.
2002 or three, I can't remember what exact year, Roman Abramovich, some rich guy from Russia, comes buys
Mm-hmm.
Chelsea. And he's just like, right, I got money and I got plenty places to spend it. Get me a nice looking coach
Mm-hmm.
who has done a few things. Which players do you need? Okay, I got you. Buy, 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 buy. And over time, he just keeps on improving, keeps on improving. Chelsea start winning. And now, where things stand, Chelsea is one of the most dominant clubs of the Premier League era. They still don't have as many First
Mm-hmm.
Division titles as Arsenal, Man U, or Liverpool. And in fact, now they don't have as many as
You about to
Manchester
start some
City.
fighting words here.
No, but hey, facts is facts, right? Facts is facts. And the thing is,
People about to start coming in the comments
hey,
right now. I hear it.
I mean, listen, they can say whatever they want, man, but I'm just here to preach the gospel of facts. And, watching the evolution, and you go from having a Chelsea who was, oh, they're nice, they got some great players, da, 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 and all of a sudden it's like, oh, they got money now. And they're winning. So they've got Premier League titles, they've got Champions Leagues, they've got other kinds of cups. And you're just like, damn, okay. And then you now get into the 2010s. Now Chelsea's the big dog. Manchester United starts
Mm-hmm.
to kind of taper away. 2012/13, they get their last title. But Manchester United spent the bulk of the 90s and the 2000s winning. So in the 27-year period that Alex Ferguson was the coach, they won 13 titles. So by the time they win their final title in 2013, right, it's kind of like, okay, Manchester is
Mm-hmm.
fading. Manchester United is fading. Chelsea is here. Arsenal is down here. And by down, I mean like fifth place, fourth place, fifth place. So it wasn't like a big deal. But then
Mm-hmm.
who's coming up? Manchester City. And with who? You thought Chelsea had money? You thought Manchester United had money? No. Manchester City's got money because they got an entire nation backing them. And again, it's like, right, we need a couple
Mm-hmm.
good coaches. Okay, Pellegrini, you over there. Mancini, you over there. Actually, no, let's get the greatest coach
Mm-hmm.
of this modern era, Pep Guardiola. And they're adding players, they're adding players. They've already won a couple of titles. So you win the first one, you're like, whatever, it's Manchester City. They just use some money. You win the second one, you win the third. And now they've won five, I think, in the last 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're in the 2020s. Like the late teens to the 2020s, and now who is dominant? It's Manchester City. So as time goes, you see it,
Mm-hmm.
and then you go back to business and you look and you say, "Wow, okay, Arsenal, sorry, Adidas and Nike are still up there, but some guys are coming back. They're stealing market share. Apple, or
Mm-hmm.
let's use phones, right? Samsung and Apple,
Yeah.
they're still up there, but ooh, Google's making phones now. Google's making their own chips. They're stealing market share, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they're part of one of the biggest companies in the world, but in terms of the phone space, they're starting to grow.
Yeah, they're
They're
not
putting
really.
some
Yeah,
serious
starting to grow.
money.
Yeah.
They're starting to grow, and they're putting some serious money behind their advertising. And they've got these great features, and they've
Mm-hmm.
been putting out features better, faster, earlier than the likes of the Apples. And Apple come back there, they'd be like, you want to talk fighting words? I'll give you this one, right? Apple will come around and tell
Hey.
you, oh, we can erase. We've got this erase feature in a photo, and it's gonna be like, oh yeah. So
Right.
Samsung and be like, and Google would be like, oh, we had that like 3 years ago. And Apple be like, this
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Staying on the.
it's innovation. Sorry, I kind of went on
Yeah,
a
innovation.
on a
Staying on
on
the
a on
phone,
a
the phone analogy. Like, no, I
yeah.
love this whole the tangent and the phone analogy. I remember a time when Nokia was big in the game, when BlackBerry was big in the game,
Thank
and
you, my
then
brother.
evolution happened. And
Yep.
then, like we don't even see Nokia. I don't even think
Thank you.
BlackBerry is still on the market. And BlackBerry was the predominant business phone at one point because
Yep.
it had the QWERTY
Yep.
keyboard to it. It was
Hmm.
reliable. They had security. Like every business used BlackBerry, and
Yep.
like what happened?
Hmm. I mean, I think now they
To the point that
do.
they couldn't pivot. They don't even
They,
exist.
they, they couldn't. I think maybe they do now more of enterprise software, but like they don't make devices anymore. And like I think even at a point in time, somebody else made it for them, and I think they licensed their name or whatever the case may be. I mean, unfortunately, they were owned by a company called Research in Motion, right? And you see it all the place. Like you
Hmm.
have there's always a point when you look at the story where you had an opportunity to pivot or to change. Look at Blockbuster and Netflix, which I reference in my
Hmm.
piece, right? We all know that story. I mean, Reed Hastings and I can't remember his co-founder's name went to Blockbuster and like, hey, come and buy us for $50 million. Imagine in like I think it was like the year 2002, something like that, right? Come buy us, and they're like, get out
Hmm.
of here for 50 million.
Hmm.
I mean, if someone offered you 50 million to take 10% of Netflix now, you'd bite their whole arm off, body, legs, everything.
Hmm.
But the point is, they had the
Hmm.
opportunity. And then Blockbuster, Netflix started innovating, and they didn't even see it and match it on time. It's fine if you kind of pass up on the opportunity, but
Hmm.
when you see things now starting to happen, you can be like, well, hold up. And that's coincidentally what
Hmm.
made someone like a Sir Alex Ferguson successful. Because when Wenger comes in, he innovates.
Hmm.
When Mourinho comes in, he innovates. He sees the way they're training their players, they're
Hmm.
changing things, diets, routines, etc., and he innovated. He didn't stay
Hmm.
still. And
Yeah.
that is what caught an Arsene Wenger. He chose to continue
Mm.
being this sort of like, oh, when I'm going to play this way, I'm going to do this way, and da 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 da. And when other people are coming and changing
Hmm.
things, he kind of got stuck. Now, it's a bit more complicated than
Yeah.
that, but that's the net effect. And so when you look at
But yeah,
business,
that's
you
the
look
net
at
effect.
sports, again, and what's the one thing that helps these guys? It's about resources, financial resources,
Hmm.
technological resources,
Right.
people resources. When you have that infusion of something different that can just change things, and in some companies it was people
Hmm.
resources. I mean, like one of the most dominant periods of Apple's career, sorry, no career, tenure was is
Hmm.
because at one point their designs were so market leading. Design, not necessarily features, but
Mm.
the way, the look and feel, the hold, it was just like, man, this is nice. And that was part of what really drove
Yeah.
Apple's
It
sales.
was.
People you hold an iPad, you're like, oh, this is so nice. You hold an iPhone, you're like, oh, so nice.
Yeah.
And so you don't even really care what the phone does. It's a phone, it will call, it's got a screen, you can watch videos, you can do this, you can do that. But the iPod, the iPad, the phone, the computers, everything. And who was the main guy behind this? It was Johnny Ive. You know, he
Uh,
was like the chief design guy. And so you have that person resource that can help you drive sales, drive performance. Then he's left. He's kind of got his
yeah.
consultancy, and I believe that Apple and um, his company have like some kind of agreement. But now he's a free agent. He can work with whoever he
Hmm.
wants to. But that's essentially what
Yeah.
I mean by resources.
Man, I love that. I love that. Now, I wanna dive into your personal insights and future outlook to kind of conclude us. I feel like me and you could talk forever, but
Yep.
I want to wrap it up here with this to give people some nuggets for the future because we gave them the whole breakdown of how that relates to the different markets and how they can see business and
Hmm.
cycles and so forth.
Hmm.
But when you look uh, at this, and then I know I'm passionate about it. I know some people. There's a lot of people who are passionate about innovation and
Hmm.
innovative capital deployment in Africa. Where do you
Hmm.
see the biggest or see the greatest potential for growth in the next decade?
This guy, man, you questions just so deep, man. You had me out here talking. I'll blame you. Got good questions. I'll just keep talking. No, I think where Africa is concerned, I mean, the biggest thing that you can immediately point to is infrastructure. But infrastructure itself is such a
Infrastructure.
broad
Okay.
term, right? And because there's such a
Uh huh.
deficit, it's very difficult to even just pinpoint one thing. But I'll attempt by saying energy. Now, energy
Energy.
is what I would like to see be the case. But that can be difficult, especially when you're looking at it for, 1 point something billion people, or, 680 million people that are under, I don't want to say under electrified, but that's essentially what it is, right? That they don't have enough power coming to their homes. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what I am seeing though is digital, like tech, and
Mm-hmm.
it was initially, mostly around payments, and you know how that's evolved, and the ease of people being able to sell and buy things, etc. Going forward though, I mean, it's it's such a hard one to say. I can't even lie to you, because the thing about it is things change so quickly. 5 years ago, let's stick on infrastructure slash energy. 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
renewable energy, it wasn't necessarily, it was never, I wouldn't say it was a pipe dream. It was just such a difficult one. When you have that
Mm-hmm.
conversation with people, talk about solar panels. I think solar is probably the leading, most abundant resource, across the continent. From a renewable energy perspective, and people with solar panels, just like,
Mm-hmm.
what? No way, man! Like solar panels, like it's so expensive. The panels are this, the batteries are that. But what we've seen is that the cost of these things has come down drastically. Now, China's played a huge part in that. And so, from an innovation perspective, you have all these funds, and investors who are now there trying to drive what we call rural electrification, because people don't have enough power.
Mm-hmm.
And power is the one thing that can really,
Yeah.
really change things on the continent. If you're there running a
Mm-hmm.
barbershop in some part of Lagos, right, and it costs you, maybe the equivalent of, call it $10 a day to power. um, you then now have
Mm-hmm.
to think about how many haircuts you can do to be able to cover that cost, and that's just power. That's not like additional personnel. That's not the equipment, other kinds of servicing, etc. And so, if you then now
Mm-hmm.
have power, and maybe it costs you $1 a day, let's say $2 a day, then you've got way more money to be able to invest in other stuff, to make better products for your, get better products to do your haircuts, to turnaround time is faster. You can hire more people to service more people at once. It's got a multiplier effect. And I think that for me
Mm-hmm.
is probably the biggest thing. How it kind of innovates depends on the specific technology, but I think that
Mm-hmm.
is the thing. Like that's where things got to get to.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right, energy. Yeah, I don't know why, but when you said energy, uh, uh, I immediately queued up in my mind the Burna Boy song "Energy." I'm gonna have
Man,
to
we
tell
didn't
my
even talk
my
about
podcast.
music. We haven't even we didn't even touch about.
We
Oh
had to
my
you had to
goodness.
come back.
Yeah, no,
You had to come back.
just tell me when and
Like
where.
we probably gonna go 2 hours if we go into that conversation.
I know, man. I know, and I even had lunch.
But
you know, and I
yeah,
still got all this
but I
energy.
do on the quick note about music, I do love that Afrobeats is just like making its way all through everywhere. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know what's your
yeah.
feelings on Afrobeats at its current
Oh
state.
man, it's it's long overdue. It's such a
Yeah.
fantastic genre. It's just amazing, and I think that
Yeah.
you know it just needs to continue. It needs to continue.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's keep seeing.
sure.
All right, let's end off on this note though.
All right.
I get young people all the time that watch this show, and I go out and speak to young folks. You've done some great things with young folks. Any advice for young professionals looking to enter into the world of finance and investment banking, especially in emerging markets? With some advice you got
Mm,
there?
mm, 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 mm. Do your research, ask questions. So one of the things that helps the research is because you want to do things that are relevant, right? So read about things that are happening in these markets. So whether you're reading Financial Times, you're reading Bloomberg, you're reading whatever the case may be, right? You're reading. You're finding out stuff. When you read, you learn who are the companies that are doing things, right? Now, the reason why you need to know who those companies are is when you eventually get an interview at you know, investment bank somewhere, and you go and sit in front of someone, people want to see that, oh, this kid is switched on. This kid gets it. This kid understands, right? Because the thing about it is, one of the things I've now learned in life, like later on in life, is that people want to work with people that they like. People want to work with people who are smart and who are switched on and who have good
Mm-hmm.
attitudes. So anybody can decide they're going to work hard, and anybody can be coachable, teachable, that kind of stuff, right? But if you're also tuned in to what they do and what they care about and what they think about, right? Then you have
Mm-hmm.
the blueprints for success. Then you take that teachability, coachability, you take that, attitude and work ethic and apply it in a direction. And so when you're always reading, and you'll hear this from all these people who I guess you could say, motivational speakers, successful business people, all that kind of stuff. They all
Mm-hmm.
tell you that they read like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you do your research, you read, you stay kind of informed, when you do get these opportunities to go and talk to these investment banks, I think that will be the one thing that helps set you apart.
Mm, I love
Yeah,
that. Thank you
yeah.
so much for those valuable lessons. And not only do these successful people read, they write their own articles too. So make
Ah,
sure you check out my boy writing articles all over the place. I can't wait for the book to drop someday.
maybe, man, maybe, man. I'm gonna send you the
You go see,
manuscript for you
man.
to edit. Yeah,
There you go, my brother. This has been incredibly enlightening talking to you today. Your experience and insights into the African financial landscape and beyond are invaluable. Thank you for joining us today. If people want to
thank you.
connect with you, where can they connect with you?
Man, LinkedIn is the spot. I mean, social media is all well and good, but I think LinkedIn kind of is just the best thing. It helps with focus. It helps with, content and just keeping things relevant, etc. And like you said, that's where I put
Mm-hmm.
some of my writing. So please feel free to reach out to me. That's where I'll be at.
Yeah, feel free to reach out to him. I connected. We connected. I think we might have to do a part two because there was so much that I want to get into, but it would have been too long for me to get into.
Anytime, bro. Holla at me.
Can we get
Holla
you
at me,
on for a
man.
second round? All right,
Yeah, for sure,
all
for
right.
sure.
We will get that scheduled.
I was about to
To
say hell yeah.
to our
Yeah, we
listeners,
can.
thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead. What you gonna say? What you gonna say?
No, I was gonna say hell yeah. You just tell me when and where. I'm here. Let's go.
So there you have it. We're gonna do a part two, ladies and gentlemen, because there was so much that we just didn't even have time to get into today. But to our
For
listeners,
sure.
thank you for tuning in. Remember to follow us for more insightful conversations like this with industry leaders like my brother. And next time we'll be exploring some different topics. We don't know yet, but we're gonna stay curious. So until the next time, thank you for joining us.
Appreciate
If
you.
you're driving, don't worry. I'm gonna get all his information. I'm gonna put it in the show notes so you can just click on there to
Yes,
connect with
sir.
him on LinkedIn. If he has a website, his whole
Yeah.
bio, all that stuff. I'm gonna put it all in there in the show notes. Until the next time, stay blessed, and we'll catch you the next time.
All right, man. Appreciate you, man.